Thank you very much, and let me call the Subcommittee on National Parks, Forests, and Public Lands to order on a hearing on the Public Lands Service Corps Act of 2009. And today, the subcommittee will hear testimony on legislation I introduced 2 weeks ago, along with Chairman Rahal, to help repair and restore our nation's public lands while employing and training thousands of young Americans and promoting a culture of public service. In 1993, when the Public Lands Corps was established through the good work of our late colleague Bruce Vento of Minnesota, there was a huge backlogs of labor-intensive work on national parklands, forests, wildlife refuge, historic sites, and Indian lands. Unfortunately, we still face those challenges and more. Years of inadequate funding have put these agencies further behind on vital maintenance work while infrastructure continues to crumble. Despite the best efforts of these underfunded agencies, natural and cultural resources have been neglected, and in many places the effects of climate change are magnifying earlier problems such as fire risks, damage by insects and invasive species, coastal erosion, and fragmented habitat. We have started to attack this problem with the recently passed stimulus legislation, but this is only a start. Much remains to be done on our public lands. The bill, H.R. 1612, will expand and invigorate an existing program, the Public Lands Corps, by streamlining its management, modernizing its scope, and providing new tools to help the program accomplish its mission. This legislation not only takes a decisive step forward in finishing desperately needed work on our national park lands, forests, wildlife refuges, historic sites, and Indian lands, but also recognizes the importance of our coastal and marine systems and our national marine sanctuaries. These lands and waters have not previously been eligible for Public Land Corps projects. Our legislation adds authority to participate in the program by offering Corps members a chance to work on restoring coastal and marine ecosystems along our oceans and Great Lakes. In addition, the legislation adds incentives and encourages the agencies to pursue an aggressive outreach program to attract new participants, especially from underrepresented populations, and prepare them for possible careers in those agencies or in conservation fields. This expanded public service initiative will introduce people from a greater diversity of social, ethnic, and cultural backgrounds to our nation's parks, forests, and public lands, not only as possible future employees, but as lifelong enthusiasts and protectors. The bill also includes language to ensure adequate housing, authorize participants in existing volunteer programs to contribute both as mentors and on core projects, expand the program for college and graduate students, and broaden preferential hire provisions. This legislation takes advantage of an opportunity to provide meaningful employment and training to young people who need it, while also improving the condition of our priceless natural and cultural resources. I am pleased that President Obama and Interior Secretary Salazar have made national service a priority, and I look forward to the comments of our administration witnesses today. I'm proud to have the support of preeminent conservation groups, as well as the leading national parks advocacy groups, all of whom are here to testify today. I also want to thank the gentleman from West Virginia, our chairman, Mr. Rahal, for his support of this legislation. Other members have also indicated their interest in service learning on public lands, and I look forward to working with them and with members of the other body who have a long interest in Public Lands Corps. With this, I will hold further comments until Mr. Bishop arrives for his opening comments, but let me welcome our witnesses today and our first panel, Mr. Will Shefforth, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Interior, Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, and Mr. Hank Cashton, Associate Chief of the U.S. Forest Service. Gentlemen, your written statements will be made part of the record. Please and your oral comments are limited to 5 minutes. Welcome. It's good to have you here. I look forward to your comments on this legislation. And, sir, if you'd like to begin. And thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Will Shafroth. I am the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Fish and Wildlife and Parks at the Department of Interior, and thank you for the opportunity to testify here on H.R. 1612 and Public Land Service Corps Act of 2009. Before I begin, I'd like to introduce the three people from the Department of the Interior who have key roles in youth service and conservation programs, and they're here to help answer any specific questions you or members of the committee may have about their particular bureaus. Christopher Jarvie, the National Park Service's Associate Director for Partnerships and Visitor Experience. Chris. Kevin Kilcullen of the Fish and Wildlife Services Branch Chief for Visitor Services for the National Wildlife Refuge System. And Mary Tisdale of the Bureau of Land Management's Division Chief of Education, Interpretation, and Partnerships. So when we get to the point where you're asking really specific questions, I'm going to turn it over to them. Mr. Chairman, the Department strongly supports H.R. 1612. You already acknowledged Secretary Salazar's commitment to this. This commitment goes back 20 years in his professional career to try to employ young people in our natural resources from all different aspects of our society. This bill would strengthen and facilitate the use of Public Land Corps program, helping to fulfill the vision that Secretary Salazar has for the promoting ways to engage young people across America to serve their community and their country. While we are strongly supportive of the bill, there are a few areas where we'd like to suggest some changes, and we'll continue to work with your staff and the committee to provide our recommended changes to you in writing in the very near future. Congresswoman DeGette, nice to see you. Expanding the use of public land corps could be a particularly important part of our overall strategy for increasing opportunities and incentives for young people to become involved, because this program serves other high priority goals as well. Besides helping us get much needed work done on our public lands, it also provides a way to first reconnect young people with their natural environment and cultural heritage. Second, it makes progress on energy conservation and the use of alternative sources of energy is another huge priority for Secretary Salazar. And third, provide education, training, and career building experiences, including a pathway to careers with federal land management agencies. The Department regards the Public Land Corps program as an important and successful example of civic engagement and conservation. The National Park Service in particular has made widespread use of the program. Last year, the Park Service had about 1,500 PLC members working on 178 projects in 99 different park units. All three bureaus have been extensively engaged in youth programs that have similar goals. We think that the changes that would be made under H.R. 1612 would strengthen and improve the Public Land Corps in ways that would encourage broader agency use of the program. We endorse adding the word service to the name of the program to emphasize that aspect of the program. Most PLC projects at national parks are designed to address maintenance and ecological restoration needs, and those types of projects would continue to be done under H.R. 1612. However, this legislation specifies a broader range of potential projects, making it likely that Corps members could become involved in more varied activities. We are used to thinking of Corps members building trails, but they could be doing all sorts of different kinds of projects, such as helping develop materials for junior ranger programs or visitor handouts on safety or working on historical documentation. Corps participants would also be able to work for a partner organization so long as the work experience is directly related to the protection or management of public lands. The National Park Service and the Fish and Wildlife Service have a large number of partners that would be potential sponsors of young people interested in the type of work they might offer. The addition of specific authority for agencies to pay transportation expenses for non-residential Corps members is critically important, because transportation costs may be a limiting factor in the participation of economically disadvantaged young people. This is something that we learned in our work in Colorado, particularly we found it to be very, very important. The Department would also benefit from the addition of a consulting intern as a new category of service employment under the PLC program. These interns would be graduate students who would help agencies carry out management analysis, development business plans, things like that, which would also be quite important. The provisions for hiring successful Corps members non-competitively at the end of their appointment would provide the agency with an influx of knowledgeable employees as well as career opportunities for those interested in the agency's mission. The legislation would also encourage bureaus utilizing this program to expand the scope of Corps programs to reflect modern-day challenges such as climate change. It would also add incentives to attract new participants, especially from underrepresented populations. Mr. Chairman, H.R. 1612 proposes many changes to the Public Land Corps Act of 1993 that we strongly support because we think they would improve and revitalize the use of this program. However, as we have looked closely at the bill, we have identified some areas of concern, such as provisions for cost sharing and hiring authority, that we want to talk to you more about. We want to take a closer look at those areas before suggesting potential amendments. As I said at the outset, we look forward to working with you and the committee on this bill. And just on a personal note, I want to again express the Secretary's strong interest and commitment to this program. When he talks to different groups, he identifies 3 programs and priorities for him in his time as Interior Secretary: the area of energy, preserving our treasured landscapes, and employing youth. So it's one of his top priorities. Every staff meeting at 10 o'clock in the morning, we talk about it. So it's on his mind. Personally, I've worked on these issues since the early 90s. I oversaw the California Conservation Corps in my job there in the state of California, and since being back in Colorado in 1994, have been involved in expanding the Secretary's good work in creating the Youth and Natural Resources program in the state of Colorado, but also helping to grow and expand a number of youth corps programs throughout our state, both at the county and the regional level. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my remarks, and I'd be happy to answer your questions from the committee.
Thank you very much. Mr. Cashman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bishop, other members of the subcommittee, it's a pleasure to be here today to talk about amending the Public Lands Corps Act of 1993. It's also a pleasure to be here with Mr. Schaffworth and the committee that follows, especially Sally Prouty, who has been a key member of the Corps Network, and it's been a privilege to work with. I also want to note that there's a class from Montreat College in North Carolina in outdoor recreation that's certainly a topic pertinent to this hearing, and we'll be looking forward to visiting with that class tomorrow in our respective offices. Mr. Chairman, let me summarize briefly the remarks contained in my testimony. First, let me say how proud the Forest Service has been and what a strong commitment it has to working with America's youth and young adults. I think this has been exemplified in how we've worked with the Job Corps Civilian Conservation Program for more than 40 years. We'll soon be the sole operator of all 28 Civilian Conservation Corps centers in the country, and it's part of that commitment to the nation's young adults. We've also worked extensively with other conservation corps, and in fact, one of the first projects rolled out under the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act was a California Conservation Corps project on the San Bernardino, which was featured last week on primetime nightly news. We have touched close to 1 million young adults with the programs that we've been involved in. It's something we've been very proud of. We really feel that as the nation becomes more urban, more technology-oriented, there's even a greater need for the authority that's would be provided in this act. We think we can expose tens of thousands of young people each year to the issues of climate change. We can help people internalize core facts that we don't feel in the heart, and that is that water comes from the natural world, not from the faucet, that the air we breathe can be purified by healthy forest ecosystems and even thriving trees in big urban environments, that wildfire can be, although dangerous and threatening, can also be good for the land, and that the relationship between with science and active management can work with nature to offer greater opportunities to improve the health of our ecosystems. And I think those broad values are reflected in the amendment being considered today. This amendment contains a noticeable shift from shovel and maintenance work to emphasis on conservation education, green jobs, research and science, leadership in the natural resource programs, work in policy and analysis, and a particular attention to cultural and heritage assets that are so important to the future of our country. And no doubt that this amendment will also help the Forest Service with its long-term employment and addressing issues of attrition. It's clearly a potential source for many new employees. In fact, I might note that Jack Lewis, a district silviculturist in Colorado who is here with us on a detail, got his start in one of these conservation corps. And it shows how important these conservation corps can be to our future workforce. And a workforce that is highly diverse and represents the diverse population of this country, and it's just an ideal source for us to tap future employees from. So we look forward to continuing to work in this environment with both Job Corps and other conservation corps. Speaking of Job Corps, the Forest Service has a strong capability in the residential aspects that are discussed in this bill. Job Corps centers are 24/7 environments serving the needs of young adults, and we have a very good capability in that area to provide residential experiences as might come from this authority. And we look forward to particularly lending that expertise. So we're very supportive from the Department of Agriculture and from the Forest Service, very supportive of this amendment. We'd be happy to look at and work with you on future details, particularly focusing on the direct hire authority, length of service requirements, and better interfaces with the Job Corps Civilian Conservation Program. So, Mr. Chairman, that concludes my verbal remarks, and I look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. And I have questions, but let me first of all turn to our ranking member, Mr. Bishop, for any opening comments that he might have. Thank you. And we're going to be called to vote in a little while, so hopefully we can get through the questions for this first panel so they won't have to wait for us. So let me forego my first questions and ask Dr. Christensen if you have any questions you might want to ask or comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just think that, you know, this bill is very timely. We've had some experience with some of the Conservation Corps students in the Virgin Islands, and I know that my superintendents at home would really welcome the passage of this bill and the updating of the Corps. I do have a question, just based on my experience with the Corps. Most of the young people have been college students, and of course we have a need, as Mr. Cash Dan has said, for all kinds of skills, and I was wondering if there were plans to work with technical schools and any collaboration with skill centers, technical schools, in providing training for some of those entry-level positions that these Corps students might, or young people might employ in the parks. And my superintendent in St. John has been interested in starting a Job Corps, for example, to provide him with some young people who could begin to volunteer in the parks, perhaps later to move into jobs and then move up into the system.
Actually, we use with the PLC.
If I may, sir, just for the record.
Yes, my name is Chris Jarvie. I'm the Associate Director for the National Park Service for Partnerships and Visitor Experience.
Thank you.
I also have youth programs. Through the PLC program, we actually do get not only college students, but we work through the Corps network and the 131 conservation corps throughout the United States. We get quite a wide variety of students and kids out of the inner city that participate in these programs. If there are other approaches that we can use to recruit participants, we will certainly look into it.
And Ms. Christensen, I might just add that, like Mr. Jarvie, there is a wide variety of participants in many of the Corps networks. I might add that in the Job Corps, of the 4,000 to 5,000 enrollees we have, the vast majority would not have college degrees. In fact, it'd be very exceptional if that were the case. So it's very much oriented towards creating new directions in their life, as well as new and emerging skills that will be so important for future careers.
Thank you. In the interest of time, I'll yield back my time.
Mr. Bishop.
Yeah, let me ask just three simple questions, Mr. Shafroth, if I could. Sure. I'd like to know about the programs as far as the supervision takes place. I've heard some very positive reviews, but I've also heard some concerns that the kids who are in this need some kind of supervision, sometimes close supervision, and that regular employees are taken from their duties to do that. How would this legislation address that sort of issue?
Mr. Chairman, want me to take a little stab at that first?
Go ahead.
Mr. Bishop, thank you for that question. Most of the work that is done through the Public Land Corps program is in a way outsourced to a partner organization like the Student Conservation Association or one of the other Corps networks, and the supervision is generally done by those organizations that our agencies are partnering with. And so there's a relatively small amount of actual supervision that occurs by the staff of the National Park Service or the Fish and Wildlife Service. Chris, you want to elaborate on that?
Well, that's generally true. With the more talented, more skilled, college-educated folks, we might work directly with them, but for the most part, the supervision comes through the various service providers that we work with. And we've been very satisfied with that and gotten good results.
Let me talk liability issues with you on a later date, if that's okay.
Okay.
How would the cost of this program, cost to operate this program change under the legislation?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Bishop, we have not done a fiscal analysis of the bill at this point.
Okay.
We certainly will be doing that as it progresses through the process, but I don't have a specific answer for you as we haven't done that analysis yet.
Okay, I'm only the ranking member. I'm not the chairman.
I know.
Unless these guys get their budget passed. All right. Let me ask one last question. In February, I sent the department a request for certain National Park Service documents. To date, I have yet to receive a response from that request. When will I get that response?
I was just made aware of that earlier today, Mr. Bishop, and I will make it my business this afternoon to go back and talk to the Director of the Park Service to expedite that process as quickly as possible.
Thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know it seems like Colorado's taking over the Interior Department, and that is our goal, just so you know. But actually, we have some. Yeah, well, you know, that's one of my hallmarks, Mr. Chairman. I will say, though, we have some excellent folks going over there, and I've known Will Shafroth for many years. He's a dedicated public servant, and I urge everyone on this subcommittee to get to know him and work with him over the following years. And I want to welcome you, Will, to your new position. We're thrilled to have you. I just have one question for the whole panel. I've been reading some studies lately that indicate that a disturbing trend in the last few years where even though our population is increasing, and certainly in the western United States our population is increasing, nevertheless, usage of our public lands is decreasing, in particular by young people. And there's some worries about this as we go into the years ahead. I've spent a lot of time talking to George Miller about this, in fact. I'm wondering if you think, any of our witnesses would think, that legislation like this bill might bring young people back into our public lands, but invest them into these areas and start a whole new generation of commitment.
Well,
for any of you.
Representative DeGette, first of all, I want to thank you for your welcome and thank you for your great service to our state of Colorado, and both here and when I first met you when you were a member of the state legislature, you've been a great champion for conservation of our natural resources. What you talk about is very important, I think, and there's a book written by a guy named Richard Louv, you may have read Last Child in the Woods, that talks about sort of the phenomena. Like you, I have high school age children, and although I make it a point of getting them out in nature, a lot of their friends don't, and I think we have a generation of young people who are not as connected to the outdoors as many in our generation were. The chairman and I talked earlier about his interest in this subject matter and his own connection to the land. My boss, Ken Salazar, has the same kind of connection, having grown up in the San Luis Valley on a ranch. But I think it's our duty in many ways to do all the different things that we can do to reconnect this next generation of Americans back to the land. And I think expanding opportunities like the Public Lands Corps is one way to do it. And I think we would like to do it in a pretty big way to try to recreate that connection, but also obviously to do the many things that need to be done on our public lands at the same time, and training young people in these careers and about natural resources.
And I might add, ma'am, that although the Forest Service is in the Department of Agriculture, Secretary Vilsack's son lives in Colorado, so we're certainly loving Colorado too. What you cited is exactly right, and it's what makes our Kids in the Woods program and our attention to this program so essential, because the natural world is so critical in meeting the basic needs that are really being challenged, and that young people frankly have such little exposure to. And I know so many employees in the U.S. Forest Service got their interest in working for the Forest Service by some contact or some encounter with somebody in the woods, either through a conservation corps or ranger or that kind of thing, and it was just so important. And so it's a major emphasis area for the Forest Service and key to, I think, some of our future as a nation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ms. Bordayo?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to go on record as saying that this is a great program, and I like to learn today that expanding the authorities of the secretaries to build upon it is certainly something I support. I noticed that the Secretary of Commerce and NOAA will be included now under this expansion authority. How are you going to be working with, in particular, NOAA, since I'm chair of the Subcommittee on Fisheries and Oceans?
Representative, that is they're not able to be here today, obviously, but especially I think with the Fish and Wildlife Service, there's a strong connection in many areas along our coasts. The Fish and Wildlife Service's jurisdiction and the National Marine Fisheries Service jurisdiction isn't that different. We care about spawning areas for fish, or we care about restoration of wetlands, we care about restoration of rivers and streams. So I think that it will be our duty to make sure that we work closely together with them to try to bring them in to this program so we're working jointly together on accomplishing our mutual ends.
So this is occurring now. You are working with them.
Yeah, in many, many ways on endangered species implementation in particular, we work closely with them, but I also think that to date there hasn't been a strong partnership on youth engagement, but I think we need to step up and do that.
Good.
And I would echo that we have obviously a very close working relationship with the Department of Interior, but we also work with the National Marine Fisheries Service, and this is another partnership we'd look forward to having develop under this act.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Sarbanes?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to thank you in particular for this proposal, because reinvigorating any program that's getting our young people out into nature is one I'm 1,000% behind, as you know, and you've been very helpful with this. We've been pushing hard with this No Child Left Inside legislation, and there's a coalition now, about 1,200 organizations across the country supporting that, including many who are promoting getting our kids into our parks and into that kind of recreational space. So I really just want to thank you for joining this effort and supporting it and working hard to make it successful. It's as though at a time when there's so much coming at our young people from the virtual world in terms of the internet and video games and television and everything, we're trying to bring them squinting out into the light of day to enjoy nature. And once they get out there, they're going to become engaged and excited and jazzed, and they're actually going to lead the rest of us out into our natural spaces, which is what's so tremendously exciting. So I'm so pleased at this legislation, and thank you all for what you're doing to support it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sarbanes. And let me thank the panelists. Mr. Shafroth, I appreciate you being here today and appreciate your comments. There was some additional questions, but rather than keep you here after the break when we go to vote, they had to do with a question about the expanding the program to include older Americans.
Mm-hmm.
I would love your reaction in writing about that.
Okay.
And the department level coordinator, why we feel that is important, and your perspective and reaction to that. Mr. Cashton, the preferential hiring provisions under this legislation, expanding that, redefining the language, your reactions and your comments on that. It is a working product, as I indicated to you earlier, and we look forward to working with you and your staff on the suggestions that you outlined today, and moving toward mutual accommodation so this legislation can go forward. And please thank the Secretary for his encouragement on it, and thank you very much. And we're going to be recessed until after votes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right.